Chapter 2. The Jews are a diseased race. This is the kind of thing that Adolf Hitler, the Chancellor of Germany and head of the Nazi Party, keeps telling the world during the 1930s. His words are presented as scientific fact, not opinion. Jews were born into slavery, he says, which makes them inferior by nature. The Germans are the master race that must take over the world. In order to do so, the master race must destroy the slave race. Some of his speeches are even broadcast in short clip, blasted from loudspeakers in the city hall square. In 1941, although most of the world doesn't yet know it, Hitler comes up with a plan to execute all of Europe's Jews. He calls it the final solution. The citizens of Germany, many of whom are out of work after the First World War, listen eagerly to Hitler, and many of them blame the Jews for all of the country's misfortunes. Of course, the whole world is in the grip of the Great Depression, and unemployment is a worldwide problem, not just Germany's. Still, Hitler is widely believed when he says that Jews are the cause of all the misery. Hitler hates many groups, such as the Roma people, sometimes called gypsies, and he deals harshly with anyone who stands up to him, even Christians. Even before the final solution, Hitler begins to rid Germany of its Jews methodically, step by step, as historians now point out. The first step is to identify who is Jewish. Eventually, Jews have to wear a yellow star sewn to their clothing at all times, and their official papers are marked with a large J. Next, new laws take away Jewish land and property and make it so that Jews cannot work in certain professions or run their own businesses. Then Jews are physically removed from the rest of the population by placing them into restricted areas called ghettos. From there, they are taken to concentration camps, which hold large numbers or concentrations of Jews. This formula, with the same steps, will soon be followed in much of the rest of Europe too. In 1938, a German officer is killed in Paris by a Jew. This sets off a backlash that results in the Night of the Broken Glass. On November 9th, all over Germany and Austria, which has become part of Germany, Nazis break the windows in synagogues, set them on fire, and smash the windows of Jewish-owned stores. The Nazis say the broken glass looks so beautiful it shines like crystal, which is why this night is called Kristallnacht in German. 1,000 Jews are killed, and tens of thousands of Jews are sent to concentration camps. Some Jews leave Germany and Austria. Others, who believe this is only temporary madness, remain where they are. In the summer of 1939, even though Europe is still at peace, Shortcut starts having nightly blackouts. All the streetlights are turned off, and my parents have to tape black paper over the windows. That way, if a German bomber pilot is flying overhead, he won't be able to see us. On September 1st, 1939, Hitler invades Poland, where 3.3 million Jews live, more than in any other country in Europe. England and France declare war on Germany. This is the beginning of the Second World War, which lasts 6 terrible years. Just before the war begins, Germany and Russia sign an agreement not to invade each other. A secret part of this pact is a plan to divide Poland between them once the war starts. Now, as far as the world is concerned, there is no more Poland. The western half becomes German and the eastern half Russian. My family and I live in the eastern half. That is why the Russian soldiers have marched into Shortcut. At first, many Jews are excited that the Russians have come to protect them from the Nazis. The Poles, who are bitter about losing their freedom, deeply resent the Jews for not hating the Russians. The gunfire I couldn't make sense of when the Russians came to town. That was young Polish men shooting at the Russian army. The Russians treat the Poles like second-class citizens, and the Poles grow even more angry. Jews should be treated this way, not Poles. The Russians send people they don't like, mostly Poles, to Siberia, thousands of miles away in eastern Russia. The Russians are communist, so there are no more private businesses or private property. Life is hard and there's less food to eat. My other grandfather, my father's father, can no longer run his small bakery. One day, my father is taken away. We don't know where he is. We think it's somewhere nearby. Maybe the nearest big city, Lvov, pronounced Lvov. One afternoon, my mother says, I have a feeling, a premonition. I'm going to make dinner for your father. He's coming home tonight. And he does. I get sick with pneumonia. I'm so weak. I can't walk. I stay in bed for weeks. I stare up at the ceiling. There's nothing to see. Dr. Nobel is here all the way from the big city of Krakow, 150 miles away, because Krakow is now under German rule. He hangs dripping wet sheets in my room. I guess the moisture from the sheets is supposed to help you. Dr. Nobel's housekeeper, who has been taking care of his place in Krakow while he is gone, writes to him, You can come home now. It's safe here. Dr. Nobel goes to the Russians to get the proper papers. The Russian police are suspicious. Why would you want to return to Germans? They want to know. They think he's a spy. He's sent to Siberia, along with his wife and daughter. My mother feels terrible. She sends them packages full of food and warm clothing. Gradually, I get my strength back. In the spring of 1941, I am 6.5 years old. I go to nursery school. My father's cousin runs the school out of her home. There are about a dozen other kids, including my cousin. We put on plays and get all dressed up. In one play, I am Queen Esther. In ancient Persia, there were a lot of exiled Jews from Israel. Haman, the prime minister of Persia, wanted to kill all the Jews. Esther risked her own life to destroy his plans and save the Jews. Esther's heroics are celebrated on the Jewish holiday of Purim. In the play, I sing a song in Hebrew. I have a crown upon my head. I have to hold the crown when I'm singing so it doesn't fall off. There are rumors. We know little about what is happening in Germany or in the German part of Poland, but some people are saying that Jews are already being sent to concentration camps where conditions are horrid and they are killed or made to work in labor camps until they die of starvation or exhaustion. People sit by their radios waiting for news. Any news. Germany, which by now has taken over Czechoslovakia, Holland, Denmark, Norway, Belgium, and France, as well as Austria and Poland, is going to war with Russia, despite their pact. The Russians leave our town, and the Germans will take over. Hearing this makes me nervous. I have felt safe under the Russians, even though I saw a man get shot. At least there was a reason. He was running. He wouldn't stop. Even though my father was taken away, after all, he came back. My mother's sister-in-law says to her, Let's go with the Russians when they leave. My mother says, Leave? How can I leave? My life is here, my family, my things. Please, my aunt begs her, I don't want to go alone. But my mother doesn't want to leave. Her sister-in-law doesn't leave either. 90% of the Jews in town don't leave. My father's cousins, 3 sisters, a brother, and their families go with the Russians. So after only 6 months, that's the end of nursery school for me. Shortkov is silent for several days after the Russian leave. Then the Germans start firing shells at a town bridge. I can hear booming. I feel the walls shake. The Germans come into town on July 6, 1941, a Sunday. Just like the day the Russians got here, I see them arrive, marching with their guns and tanks, wearing goggles, tall black boots, and leather jackets. I understand. This is what invading soldiers do. What I don't understand is what happens among the people in our town. The three populations in Shortkov, the Catholic Poles, the Orthodox Christian Ukrainians, and the Jews, lead mostly separate lives. The Poles speak Polish and write using the Roman alphabet, the way English is written. The Ukrainians, who tend to live in the countryside, speak mostly Ukrainian and use the Cyrillic alphabet in which Russian is written. The Jews who live in town speak Polish, except for the religious Jews who speak Yiddish and use the Hebrew alphabet. What we all wear is different too. I especially like the way the Ukrainian women dress when they come to town on Sundays. In their long embroidered white shirts, purple-red skirts, and many-colored belts. They also wear circles of flowers in their hair, with long dangly ribbons. In Shortkov, despite the many differences, when we see one another in the marketplace, everyone is polite. Because the Russians treated the Poles badly, you might think that the Poles, under German rule, would show hostility to the Jews. But in our town, it's the Ukrainians who change. Now they pick on the Jews. We hear dirty Jews constantly. To children. 2. Groups of Ukrainian kids attack Jews. One gang beats up my father. I see him afterward. He is all bloody. His clothes are soaked. It is a dark, clay-like red. He is never the same after this. It's not long before my father becomes gravely ill. What's wrong with him? I ask my mother. She says, his blood is turning to water. I don't know what she means. Food grows even more scarce. My mother tries to get my father some liver, which has iron, to build up his strength. But she can't. He probably needs blood transfusions, but of course, they're not available. A local Jewish doctor treats him, but medical supplies are limited. My father is dying. My mother thinks I don't realize this, but lots of relatives are always stopping by. We live in such close quarters. I hear things. How could I not know? I'm taking to a cousin's house so I won't see my father die. My father dies at home in the summer of 1942. It's a warm day. The sun is hot on the back of my neck. I come home from my cousin's house and my father simply isn't there. My father's mother dies only a few days after my father of grief. My mother's father, the gifted tinsman who liked to eat meat twice a day, is dead too. He had a stroke right after the German occupation. I have never in my young life lost anybody. Now I am losing people whom I love. Now I have to take in the concepts of gone and forever. I look to my mother. She's not falling apart. She's staying strong for me.